Hello and welcome to our presentation on direct deposit, setup and processing in your Sage BusinessWorks accounting software. In this presentation, we will be discussing the initial setup of your system, setting up your employees to receive direct deposit checks, and the processing and transmitting of this direct deposit to your bank. So let's get started. Now, the first step is to prepare our system to perform direct deposit processing by entering all the required banking information. So to do this, we need to go to our direct deposit parameters located under Payroll, Transfer, Direct Deposit Parameters. Your financial institution will need to assist you with this information. The first parameter is your bank's name. Then you need to select the bank account type. Typically that would be a checking account. However, if you are using a savings account, you would need to select savings. Your company identification is normally the number 1 plus your federal tax ID. Again, you need to verify this information with your banking institution. The immediate destination is your bank's routing and transit number. If your bank needs to have this information in their file, you can select this checkbox to preface the immediate destination with a blank. The originating DFI is your company's routing and transit number. The DFI account number is your company's bank account number. Now again, all of this information should be supplied by your bank. In the next section, we have immediate origin. This is your company's routing and transit number. The immediate origin name is the name of your bank. The receiving DFI is the company routing and transit number. And then we have a company entry description. This is usually just payroll. The header label record is typically used for magnetic tape filers, and it's really not used much anymore, so you really should just leave this blank. Now in your general ledger, you need to create a holding account. In this case, I did set up a holding account in my general ledger, and I set it up as a current liability. We also need to set up an account for our direct deposit fees. And here I have set up a direct deposit fees general ledger account, and I did set it up as an expense type. And then we need to enter the cash account, our checking account, that we are using for our payroll. The next step is to set up our employees for direct deposit, and we do that by going to Payroll, Employees, Maintain Employees. Now I'm going to look at my employee Aikens and click on the direct deposit button. And here's where I enter the direct deposit information. For my employee Aikens, I've set up a routing number, an account number. The account type, we can select the savings account or checking account. In this example, we've selected a savings account because our employee, John Aikens, has asked that a fixed amount of $100 be deducted and transmitted and deposited into their savings account every payroll. And for the net amount, they would like that to go into their checking account with this routing number, this account number. It's a checking account, and it's percent of net, and the percent of the net is 100%. Here I need to select that it's active, and if my employee would like to have email advices, then I select email advices. Now email advices, when you're posting and printing the checks, it will come up with an email advice to email the check voucher directly to the employee. There will be no printed check stub to hand to the employee. So they have their choice of either a printed check stub, which would be unchecked, or an email advice, which would be checked. We want to make sure we have an email address in here if they are selecting to email, or it won't be able to email that advice to the employee. So again, we go back into our direct deposits, and let's talk about this screen for a moment. When the funds are distributed, it's going to do it in the order of our priority here. So it's going to first distribute $100 fixed amount into this savings account, and then priority to 100% of whatever is left will go into this checking account. Now, if I had two fixed amounts, and this fixed amount was $100 on each one of them, if there is any amount left over on the net, so I have $200 here, but let's say that the net amount of the check is $250, it will always take that excess amount and distribute it to the first priority. So that would mean if it was $250, $150 would go into the savings account and $100 to the checking account. If I select percent of net for each one of these, then the percents must total 100%. So I could say 50% and 50%, but it must total 100%, whatever I decide on the percent of net. For my example, I'm going to use a fixed amount each pay period of $100 that goes into my employee savings account, and he would like the rest of it to go into this checking account. So 100% of what's left over will go into the checking account. Now the last step I need to take in setting up my employee for direct deposit is to send a pre-note. Now a pre-note is a $0 amount that must be transmitted to each employee's bank account before real funds can actually be transferred. The purpose of the pre-note is to verify that the routing number and the account numbers are correct and that the bank can receive that credit without any problems. So once I've got everything set up, I say OK and save. And before I send my pre-notes, I'm going to verify that my setup is correct, and I can do that by running a report under Payroll, Employees, Employee Direct Deposit List. And this is where I'm going to see each of my employees that I have set up for direct deposit, whether or not they're receiving email advices, their bank account numbers, whether it's going into a savings or checking account, and how the distribution will be, whether it's a percent or a fixed amount. So we want to verify this information and make sure it's correct before we actually transmit that pre-note. You'll notice the pre-note status over in the far right says pre-note pending. That means that I will not be able to do a direct deposit check for this employee Aikens until I've actually transmitted that pre-note. For these two employees, Anthony and Garcia, they are already active for direct deposit. So those two employees I could go ahead and do direct deposit checks for. So let's go ahead and send the pre-note for our employee Aikens. So I'm going to close out of here and go to Payroll, Transfer, Create Direct Deposit File. Now we want to give this a unique number, so we're going to use the number 12, and then I'll just use today's date. For include pre-notes, our options are yes, to include it along with any of our direct deposit transmittals, so it would transmit direct deposit checks and pre-notes. No would mean I'm only transmitting direct deposit checks, no pre-notes, and only says just send pre-notes and pre-notes only. So I'm going to say OK, and it's going to tell me that it saved my file and it created it, calling it BWPay DD Sample Company, which is the name of my company, Sample, and 012, which is the unique number that was signed, and it saved it in my BW data folder. Now, if you're not sure where that BW data folder resides, you can go to Help and About, and it will show you the data path For me, it's on my C drive under Sage BW Data. Sage BusinessWorks will always save the direct deposit transmittal files in your BW Data folder. They will always be saved as a BW Pay DD and then the name of your company. So let's find our file. So I've now browsed out to my C drive to the Sage folder BW Data, and I find my file called BW Pay DD, and it references my company sample, and it has the number 12, and I can see it was created today. So I can take this file, I can email it to my bank, I can upload it to their website, I can burn it to a CD, however my bank would prefer that I send them the file. But this would be the file that I send to the bank. Now that I've transmitted my pre-notes, if I go into Payroll, Employees, Maintain Employees, look at my employee aikens and check the direct deposit setup, you'll notice that the pre-note check marks are now gone. If I check my Payroll, Employees, Employee Direct Deposit list, we now see that my employee Aikens is active and I can send direct deposit checks for Aikens. So now that I can see he's active, let's go ahead and process a time card and payroll check for our employee Aikens. So we're going to go into Payroll, Processing Time Card Entry, and I'll pull up my employee Aikens. And we'll use the standard time card, but we're also going to add, maybe 8 hours of sick time and maybe a few hours of vacation. And maybe some holiday pay. Maybe we had a holiday in there. So we have 16 hours of regular pay. He had 1 day that he was sick. He took 1 day of vacation pay, and there was a holiday as well. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and then we'll do our automatic payroll calculation. And we'll do it just for our employee Aikens. You'll notice that we get a note that comes up that we have direct deposit checks, that one or more of the checks that I just calculated is marked as direct deposit, and it's reminding me that I will need to transfer funds using the direct deposit option once I'm completed. So I'll say OK, and then we'll preview it. And at this point I can preview the payroll register just to make sure that everything looks good. I can see that I have my regular hours, my vacation, sick, and holiday. And here you'll notice that the direct deposit, this is the amount that will be going into the checking account. And here's the net pay of 0. So I close out of here and we're ready to process the check. So to print my checks, I go to my payroll processing, print payroll checks. Now in my print payroll checks option, I have the option to print checks only, to print direct deposit only, or to print both employees who are on direct deposit or those who are receiving checks. So I'm going to do just my direct deposit, and I'm going to do just my employee Aikens that I've calculated. Here I have my option to print a check register afterwards and also print a check voucher. So I'm going to select that I do wish to see a check voucher and the check register. I can change my starting direct deposit number if I prefer. And then I need to enter the last day of my pay period and my check printing date. So I'll change this to June 30 and June 30. Now the email button would be activated if I had any employees who had selected to have their direct deposit check voucher emailed rather than printed, okay, and handed to them. I'm going to go ahead and print for my employee Aikens. I'm going to say yes to load my check forms, and I really don't need to see a print alignment test. And now it's processing and printing the check. Now I say OK. And again, it reminds me that I did have some direct deposit checks and that I will need to transfer funds using the direct deposit option. So I say OK and reload my paper. So now it brings me back up to the print payroll checks. I'm done, so I'll just close out of here. And now it's going to come up asking me about printing my check register. So I can go ahead and preview my check register, and it will show me the breakdown of the hours and the rate of pay, any deductions at the same time. I close out of that. And now, because I have selected to see the check voucher, I'm going to go ahead and preview this. Now, check voucher can be emailed to my employee, or I can print it out and hand it to my employee. The check voucher is very handy because it does have the breakdown of the gross pay, net pay. This is the amount that went into their bank account. It does have the breakdown that usually is required as a compliance by the states that says on the stub or on a check voucher they need to see the number of hours and the rate of pay that they were paid for each of those hours, whether it's vacation, sick pay, holiday, all of the deductions. And then we close out of here. And now that we've completed our payroll check option, we now are ready to transmit our direct deposit. So here we go into payroll, transfer, and first we're going to preview our report just to make sure that what we will be transmitting to the bank is correct. So I'm going to preview this to the screen, and I can see that it does show my employee Aikens, and that it does show that it's taking $100 and putting it into his savings account. And the balance of the $275.65 is going into the checking account. So after review, it looks like everything is correct, so I'm ready to transmit. So I close out of here, and again I go to my payroll, transfer, create direct deposit file. So now I'm ready to use number 13. It's got an effective deposit date. I'm going to use today's date. As far as pre-notes are concerned, I really don't have any pre-notes to include, so I'm going to answer no on including pre-notes. The last option is whether or not we are creating an unbalanced file. So let's talk about this for just a moment. Now, this is what you will need to get from your bank. You need to find out from your bank, do they require a balanced file or an unbalanced file? A balanced file is called a notcha file. That file contains a debit entry that makes the file a balanced file. So it has all of your payroll, the net of the payroll for $375.65 in our example, and then it will put the debit entry of $375.65 to make that a balanced file. An unbalanced file is an ACH file. The unbalanced file does not include the debit entry, so it makes that file an unbalanced file. So it's only going to include my direct deposit check of the $375.65. There will be no offsetting debit, so my file will be an unbalanced file. Again, you need to contact your bank and find out from your bank if they wish to have an unbalanced file or a balanced file, and that will be up to you to select that. I'm going to go ahead and create a balanced file, and now it shows me that it created my BW Pay DD with my sample company number 13, and it has put that file in my BW data folder. Now I can go out, browse out, and find that file and send it to my bank, either upload it to their website, email that to them, burn it to a CD, however they wish for us to send that file. Now I want to discuss one more time about the check vouchers and our check register. If we go to payroll, reports, check register, and we do it for our employee Aikens, for the current payroll batch, and we preview it to the screen, we're going to see that it shows the check number and it's got all the breakdown on the check register that we need as far as the hours and the hourly rate. We also see in the upper right here next to the net pay this asterisk. This asterisk, you'll notice the note down here says this asterisk next to the net check amount indicates this was a direct deposit check. So that's how we know if this was a regular check or a direct deposit check. Again, the check vouchers can be printed for the current pay period, current payroll batch, but we can't select a prior period or a specific date. If I select to see my employee Aikens, I also can select whether or not I want to see those that were paid by check or those that were paid by direct deposit. I preview it to the screen and I'm going to see the same information. Now what's nice about the check vouchers are the check vouchers can be given to the employees because they're satisfying state reporting requirements. The information required is sometimes it's just more than we can print on a check stub. So the check voucher lists the gross pay, the net pay, the pay period covered, the hours worked, the hourly pay, your sick time, your available sick time. If you're paying by piece rate, it will show the pieces. So this is really a good voucher to give to your employees that gives all the information that is required for state reporting requirements. And again, that's under your payroll, reports, check vouchers, and we can only print those with the current payroll batch or current pay period. So now let's talk about how our payroll posted into our general ledger. Now remember, when we set up our direct deposit, under our direct deposit parameters, we were required to enter a holding account. I used account 3405. So when we go to the general ledger and we look at our journal report and we look at today's entries only for our payroll, here's our check number 4 to our employees Aikens. And when we get down to the net check, you'll see that it posted into our direct deposit holding account. So it didn't go into our checking account, it went to our direct deposit holding account. Now what happens is, because there may be some lag time between the time that you've actually sent your transmittal file to the bank and the time that the bank actually verified and notified you of the processing fees, then you need to post the payroll total and the processing fees for each payroll transaction separately. So remember, when it posted to the general ledger, it went into our holding account. Under our parameters, when we set up our direct deposit parameters, we set up the direct deposit fees account of $72.25 and our fees cash account, meaning the checking account that we're using for our payroll, of the $10.50. Now one more thing I'd like to point out. When we posted the direct deposit checks, they posted into our general ledger, but nothing was actually posted into our cash management bank reconciliation. If I look at my check register and I look at my cash account number 1 for today's checks, I don't need to see any of my outstanding EFTs or voided checks or other checks, just outstanding and cleared checks. And I look at today, the only thing I see are some payroll tax deposits that I paid, but you don't see my check number 4, which was my direct deposit check that was printed for my employee John Aikens. Now the reason for that is because when you get your paper bank statement, you're going to have one payroll total on there, and that's going to be the total of the net direct deposit checks. So it's not going to have each individual direct deposit check on there, but the total that was withdrawn from your checking account for the net payroll for that payroll run. So here's what we do. We get the notification from our bank that the direct deposit transmittal was successful. They give us our processing fees, and we're now ready to post that. So we go to our payroll, transfer, post direct deposit. I'm going to post my direct deposit with my June 30 date. My direct deposit check total is $375.65, and I was notified that I was charged $5 for the direct deposit fees. I can now post that. So now if I go into my general ledger and I look at my journal report, we'll just look at for today's entries only, coming from our payroll, we see our check, and here we'll see that it posted the direct deposit fees and it posted the expense to our account 7225 that we set up in our direct deposit parameters, and it took it out of our checking account, 1050, that's what we had defined in our direct deposit parameters, and at the same time it took out of our holding account 3405 the 375.65 and credited our checking account, withdrawing the funds from our checking account. It also posted into our bank reconciliation the direct deposit charge. So we have our charge for the direct deposit transfer of $375.65, because remember, that's going to be the net amount that appears on my paper bank statement. And we have a $5 direct deposit fees charge, and again, that will appear on my paper bank statement. Now that we've completed our setup and processing of our direct deposit checks, there's just a couple of other items I wanted to discuss. First, how can I void my direct deposit batch that I posted into my bank reconciliation and general ledger? So let's say that the amounts that I entered were incorrect, maybe the bank processing fees were wrong, maybe I just needed to void my entire direct deposit batch and start over again. So how can I void that? Now remember, we originally posted that by going into our payroll, transfer, post direct deposit. It posted a charge into our cash management. In our bank reconciliation, we'll see the charges for the total of the payroll checks and the $5 processing fee. It also posted through to our general ledger. So now if I need to correct that, it's an easy process of just voiding those charges in our cash management. Now in my case, I'm just going to correct my direct deposit fees because I found out that the direct deposit processing fees were really only $4. So I'm going to go to cash management, transactions, void bank transactions. Remember, these were charges, so I have to select a transaction type of charge. Click on the lookup, find my processing fees, and then void. And now if I check in my general ledger, and I'll check my journal report for today's entries only, we're going to see that it voided not only in our bank reconciliation, but all the way through to our general ledger. So again, if I check my bank reconciliation, all I'm going to have will be the $375.65 transaction for the net payroll. Now I need to repost it correctly. So I go to my payroll, transfer, post direct deposit, change my date. And this time I don't have a direct deposit check total because that total was correct. I just needed to correct my processing fees. Now remember, you can correct the entire amount if you need to. So in my case, in this example, we're only doing the processing fees. I now say post. I go to my cash management, transactions, reconcile checking account. Click on reconcile. We now see the direct deposit fees have been posted for $4. That's what should appear on my paper bank statement. And if I go into my general ledger, look at my journal report, and I select today's journal entries, you can now see that it posted through to my general ledger. Now you may on occasion need to void a payroll direct deposit check. So depending on the circumstances as to whether or not the direct deposit transmittal file has been created, or if it has been created, if it has been submitted to your bank, we have steps on the options you need to take depending on your circumstances. So search our knowledge base for article number 18759 on how to void a payroll direct deposit check. This concludes our presentation on how to set up and process your payroll direct deposit checks. We want to thank you for joining us today.